Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Yonit Arthur. I'm an audiologist and coach. You're on the Steady Coach. Today, we're going to be tackling a heavy topic, and that is how to progress in recovery when you're feeling unmotivated, numb, exhausted, depressed, and maybe even hopeless. The typical person that I often describe on my channel and that you've probably heard referred to elsewhere in other videos and content related to neural circuit symptoms is a person who's dealing with a very high fight or flight response, which usually is what people notice as anxiety. People who are dealing with a high fight or flight response often have the opposite problem of feeling unmotivated. And in fact, in many of my videos, what I'm trying to help people do is slow down and stop fighting, avoiding, resisting sensations and feelings so much, because those things increase the fear response, increase the likelihood that your brain is going to predict or interpret danger in your environment, and then mistakenly interpret triggers like the sensations themselves or other things that lead to sensations to happen as dangerous. But people who are dealing with a lot of anxiety and who I'm trying to get to slow down have a little bit of an advantage in the sense that they're able to do a lot of the things that I talk about on my channel and use a lot of the tools. In contrast, in the state that you may be in right now, if you're feeling really slow and depressed and hopeless, maybe even stuck, you may have a really hard time putting any of these tools into action. And that is bad news, because in order to recover from neural circuit dizziness and other symptoms, you're going to need to do some work for it. In addition, many of you know what I just said, and you may be shaming yourself all the time because you're not implementing the tools that you know you should be implementing. This makes danger mode or the fear response even stronger and can lead to more intense symptoms. So we've got to do something with this state that you're in if you're experiencing what I described. And in this video, I'm going to teach you some tools that you can use to help get yourself out of a state of depressed, numb, powerless feelings and into a state that will allow you to put the tools into action. And an added bonus here is the tools that we're talking about in this video are actually very useful for neural circuit symptoms in general. So once you get out of this state, putting this all into practice around symptoms is going to be a lot easier. On this channel, I focus primarily on symptoms related to chronic dizziness, usually coming with diagnoses like PPPD, MdDS, vestibular migraine, and other chronic dizziness symptoms that don't have a good medical explanation for why they're chronic. But this video applies just as much to those of you who are dealing with tinnitus, hyperacusis, chronic pain, chronic fatigue syndrome, POTS, and other chronic symptoms that are the result of your nervous system being overly sensitive. If you're new here, please be sure to hit the subscribe button and the little bell so I can notify you when new content comes out. And let's jump into how to get yourself out of a depressed or unmotivated and powerless state. So coming back to the fight or flight response that I referenced earlier. First of all, if you don't understand the connection between the fight or flight response and the symptoms you're having, you're going to want to pause this video just for a few minutes and watch one of my basics videos, which I'll include in the video description below. But one response that we don't talk about quite as much on my channel is the freeze response. So basically, when your nervous system encounters a threat, usually what it does is try to respond by either having you fight it away or run away from it. That's the fight or flight response. But sometimes, if the particular stressor is just so big and overwhelming that your nervous system determines you can't fight it or run away from it, you will go into a freeze response instead. The freeze response basically means that you're paralyzed, you're stuck, you can't move forward. And if you're experiencing that numb, unmotivated, depressive state right now, chances are your nervous system has you stuck in a freeze response. And essentially, when you're in a freeze response, your nervous system believes that whatever stressor is happening, in your case, potentially the sensations themselves, but also other emotional things that may or may not be related to the symptoms themselves, are just too much for you to handle. And essentially, it just shuts you down. Another way to think about this is you are in a state of overwhelm. It's just too much. So often what I see from clients who are dealing with this freeze state is they will try to implement the tools that I'm talking about here and in the free course, which is also linked in the video description, and they just can't motivate themselves to do it. It's like they just hit a brick wall, or if they do it, they just can't get themselves to stick with it, and it takes so much energy that it seems like it just shouldn't. One really important thing for you to know before I go into some steps that you can use to get yourself out of it is that this is a very normal thing to happen when faced with overwhelming stress. And to remind you, again, that may be related to symptoms or something totally separate in your life, but when those things all come together, they fill up the stress bucket, which is something I've talked about elsewhere on my channel. The stress bucket essentially refers to a bucket that contains all of the stressors in your life, symptoms, not symptoms, how you deal with other people, how you talk to yourself, weather changes, anything that can be interpreted as something that your body and brain need to respond or adapt to. When that bucket is full and overflows, that leads someone into this fight or flight response I keep referring to. But if the bucket is so full that it is completely overwhelming you and water is just gushing out everywhere, that puts you in a freeze response. And it is normal in a freeze response to feel completely helpless and unmotivated. So it's not your fault that you're feeling that way, although of course, as always, it is your responsibility to get out of it. Now, you'll probably hear me use the term learned helplessness a few times in this video. So learned helplessness is a concept that came up first in research. In kind of an unpleasant experiment, researchers found that when animals were administered shocks and they absolutely could not get away from them no matter what they did, eventually, the animals gave up and just sat there taking the shocks. In contrast, when animals learned that they were able to change the shocks in some way, they didn't exhibit this helpless, frozen behavior. So a big part of our strategy to get you out of this is to recognize that helplessness is a part of what's keeping you stuck, and we need to directly address that. And I want to say here, of course, I'm not referring to any of you as a helpless person. You may be an incredibly strong, accomplished, and successful person. What I'm referring to is your brain is interpreting the situation as totally unmanageable, and it's putting you in a helpless state, even if you're not a helpless person. So the first thing that you need to do is be educated on the fact that there actually are ways out of this. I think many of you end up in this numb and unmotivated state because you've been told repeatedly through medical professionals or online research or so-called support groups that recovery is not possible. And that puts you in a totally powerless state. So a big part of feeling like you have power again is knowing that it is possible. So for those of you who are new especially, this is a time to watch some success stories and just watch for that little voice in your head that says, yeah, but I'm different, or yeah, this person had almost the same thing as I did, but this is somehow different from what I experienced, or this person had a different cause initially, so this doesn't apply to me. I'm going to have a different video on doubts that you're really going to want to watch as well, so be sure to look for that in the video description as well. Okay, step 2, once you're educated and at least cognitively in your mind know that recovery is possible, and you have some openness to the idea that recovery is possible, this is going to be the most counterintuitive step I talk about today. You need to stop fighting your depressive or numb feelings. Stop fighting them. In fact, I'm going to ask you to do the opposite and actually feel them on purpose. And you may be saying, but Yonit, if I do that, I just ruminate and spiral. There's a difference between feeling the sensation and the emotions that are coming with this sense of numbness, this sense of unmotivatedness, and the story that your brain is trying to tell you around what that means. Two separate things. So in this step, all I'm asking you to do is admit it to yourself. Admit what you're feeling right now and allow your body to feel as unmotivated, numb, depressed as it feels right now. Again, you're going to want to be aware of the story that comes with that. We're going to work with that in the next step. And when I refer to stories, what I'm referring to is all the doubts, all the thoughts. I'm never going to get better. This is going to be the rest of my life. My life is ruined. I'm never going to be successful again. And all of those types of thoughts. So in step 3, you're going to want to work with the story to keep it separate from the thoughts. And this is illustrated again very well in the video that I discussed already on doubts. Because ultimately, even when you hear these very definitive statements in your head, I'm never going to get better, everyone else can do it, but I can't, or no one gets better, whatever it is, you can work with those kinds of thoughts in the exact same way as you can what if thoughts. So please give that one a watch to help you work with the story. In step 4, what you're going to be doing is slowing way down. What you're looking for in this step is still to feel whatever it is that you're feeling, but now starting to recognize that when you have a numb, depressed, hopeless kind of feeling, it's usually stopping you from feeling something else. So you can ask yourself, if I weren't feeling this feeling right now, what would I be feeling that's even deeper or even worse or even more intense? So you can even just ask yourself the question while you're feeling this feeling in your body, if I weren't feeling this feeling right now, what might I feel that's even worse or even more intense or even harder to feel? And often you'll get answers like, I would feel really angry about my symptoms, or I would feel just completely despairing and sad and grieving, and it would just take me over. You're just noting these things and starting to get some practice responding to these sensations in what I think of as a contained way. A contained way means that you're starting to observe these feelings without getting lost in them. And what normally helps people get lost in a feeling is when that story is going in their heads and they just spiral down into the story and the feelings and they feed each other, which is why I'm asking you to separate the story in the previous step. In this case, you're just feeling raw emotion for now. You can always use the words for now when you're practicing this. Letting it happen, being curious about what's underneath, and doing that from a position of observing your body, allowing it to be there, rather than being completely overwhelmed and overtaken by the feeling. This takes some practice. And if you'd like some ideas about how to do this kind of thing, if you've never tried something like this before, there's a great book about feeling feelings called Living Like You Mean It. I'm going to put a link to that in the video description. You can find that at your favorite bookseller. Okay, next step. Now that we're not fighting the feelings and you're actually aware of the feelings and you're responding to them by allowing them to be there and containing them in some way. Again, for more ideas on how to do this, check out the book I mentioned. Now we're ready to take behavioral action. This is another big counterintuitive step. Most importantly, I want you to build a routine that you follow come hell or high water, no matter how good or bad a day is. And the most important component of this step is being brutally honest with yourself about what you're capable of doing right now. That's both in relation to symptoms and it's in relation to motivation. If you know that there is absolutely no way you can summon up the motivation to do a whole bunch of activities related to healing your chronic symptoms right now, then don't put those on your schedule. It can be very simple stuff. For those of you who are mostly stuck in bed, it may be very simple activities. For those of you who have a routine and are going to work, it may be just looking at the routine you already have and just asking yourself, is this something I can be consistent with day in, day out? Looking for big empty spaces of time and trying to add a little bit of structure. The reason for this is not so you can fight your way out of symptoms and build in a bunch of tools that you can use to get better. It's to help your nervous system feel safe and to give you a sense of agency back. Remember, I talked at the beginning about how all of these issues relate to a feeling of powerlessness and learned helplessness. A big way you can help yourself not feel helpless is when you meet your own expectations and actually hit the bar that you set for yourself, no matter how low it needs to be to start off. In terms of nervous system safety, just think about a toddler or even a pet. Toddlers and pets respond very well to routine because they know what to expect. It makes them feel safe. Your nervous system is the same way. And again, to emphasize, this is not the time to be building in all sorts of healthy habits that you know are going to help you. You want to be totally, brutally honest and realistic about what you can do right now. Once you've stuck to that routine, maybe for a week, maybe for 2 weeks, that's when you can start to ask yourself, where can I leverage changes in my routine to help increase my sense of agency? In other words, reduce feelings of powerlessness. This isn't necessarily even about symptoms, although sometimes doing things like somatic tracking and graded exposure make people feel less powerless because they feel like they're able to do something. But it can be much more basic at the level that you're at right now. It doesn't need to relate to symptoms. One recommendation I have for you is to think about building some kind of service to others that does not come with obligations. So this rules out helping people you already feel like you should be helping, like your family or neighbors. Any shoulds, this is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about providing service to people that you don't feel obligated to help. For some of you with a lot of empty space on your schedule, that may mean some volunteer work, whether that's with people, animals, or something else. There is nothing like the sense that you're useful in some way that often gets lost when you're dealing with neural circuit symptoms to help you start to feel a sense of power again in your life. And only now, in this final step, you can start to build in the tools that I talk about here on my channel and in the free course. Again, I'm not forbidding you from using them before now, but the whole point of this entire exercise is to get you in touch with what you really feel so you can be really brutally honest with yourself about what you're capable of right now, building a routine that allows you to win, allows you to meet the expectations, and then slowly building from there to give you a sense of power back. Before we go, just another book that I want to recommend to you, because small habits here work really well for helping increase your ability to build that structured routine. Atomic Habits by James Clear is a wonderful way to think about changing the habits and also in the process changing the way that you see yourself, which ultimately is going to pull you out of the state that you're in right now. I hope this was helpful, and I am truly sorry you're going through this right now. It is absolute torture to feel unmotivated to get better when all you want to do is get better. But good news, you can get better. There are many other people who've walked this same path, who've also felt depressed, unmotivated, numb, frozen in their recoveries, and they've been able to successfully pull themselves out of it and live much better, fuller lives. Questions and comments, just drop them below. Thank you as always for being here. Like, share this video, subscribe to my channel. These things help me reach more people. You guys are wonderful. See you soon. Bye-bye.